So I haven't talked about this guy in a while, and I have a particular dislike for him. I've met him in real life. I was not impressed. Both he and his wife were probably the least interesting people that were at the talk that I went to, that I met them at. I think it was with Peter Boghossian and James Damore were also there. Peter Boghossian, I really wish he hadn't fallen down the rabbit hole so far because he was actually a pretty cool guy. James Damore was very uncomfortable. It was a very, very weird night. But that is when I first met Bret Weinstein. Now, I didn't really give that much of a shit about Bret Weinstein. I mean, yeah, he's like intellectual dork web, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But he has really made a name for himself, by which I mean a bad name for himself, by pushing ivermectin, being a COVID denialist, being a vaccine denialist, and just in general being an insufferable, anti-intellectual dumb fuck. Because that is what he is. He's a fucking dumb fuck. But anyway, we hadn't watched any of his stuff for a while. I saw this very, very simple, quick video from Livestream 135. It's about 5 minutes long, and it says January 6th followed years of political violence. And I'm not even going to make any predictions from it. I'm pretty sure I know where it's going to go, but I just want to absorb it. So absorb it with me, everyone.
I want to talk briefly about a piece in Newsweek, of all places. Newsweek, which still exists, at least online.
Yeah. It's much more relevant than you.
Anyway, they published something by Jeremy Lee Quinn, who has been a guest of Dark Horse twice, I believe. Yep. Jeremy Lee Quinn is a very interesting fellow. He is a journalist, a freelance journalist, who was on the ground on January 6th in Washington. He's been on the ground here in Portland. He was on the ground for riots in LA. He does seem to know where to go to see violence unfolding. In any case, he published a piece. Zach, do you want to put up the piece in question?
Now, I will say, so people who do on-the-ground coverage of, say, protests or social upheaval and that sort of thing are not all made equal, okay? There are some great ones. There are some great journalists out there. You know, Robert Evans is fucking incredible when he's actually out and about doing that, but he also does, like, these amazing podcasts and shit, too. But keep in mind, Tim Pool started out doing that kind of shit, and look where he fucking went. So I have no idea who Jeremy Lee Quinn is. We'll see what kind of oh, wait. Hang on. I just read the line. January 6th followed years of political violence. The committee should investigate leftist violence too. Well, that answers that fucking question.
There it is. All right. So this is a piece, Jeremy Lee Quinn, January 6th followed years of political violence. The committee should investigate leftist violence too. Now, so
fascinating.
Is it fascinating? Why would that be fascinating? Why is that? Why I don't even understand why that would be a good idea. Why would the January 6th committee investigate stuff that is not related to January 6th? Why would they do that? Their name is the January 6th Committee. I'm confused.
The reason I raise this is
Jesus, that is
actually two different reasons. Okay. One, Jeremy Lee Quinn is not a right-winger. In fact, he considers himself an anarchist, and at some point I'd like to have a conversation with him about what that really means.
People can call themselves whatever the fuck they want. It's what they do. It's what they say and what they do that really kind of communicates what they are. Not like people will try and avoid having to say that they're a conservative right-winger by saying, I'm a classical liberal, but it's the same fucking thing.
Understand him to be a very reasonable guy, and it's hard for me to imagine how any very reasonable person becomes an anarchist, but he seems to take a decidedly nuanced approach to anarchism, and I'd like to understand what the nature of it is. So stay tuned for that at some point we'll do it.
I
But
feel like you talked a little bit about it in what you did.
we did.
Yeah.
Let's just say I still don't quite get it, and so I have a feeling that he's technically an anarchist, but doesn't mean what most of us infer from that.
Okay, anyway, where were we? Fuck. God, you gotta pick it up a little bit, Brett. This is driving me fucking crazy. Come on, man.
Nonetheless, the piece that he writes essentially says, look, January 6th was a travesty, but it exists in a context of political violence stretching back years on both sides. And
that is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. That seems to imply that there wasn't anything very specifically unique about January 6th. And there was. There absolutely was. There's a reason why this is not the exact same, why you can't really just basically compare it. And we'll get to it in a minute. But how far back do you want to go? Because I have a feeling that they're going to try and make a case for leftist violence in the past, say, 8-10 years or so. And there has been political violence in this country since it started. So I'm just saying, man, I don't know. That's fucking weird to me.
And it is impossible, I think, to read this piece and not realize what's going on. Now, I have not been paying attention to the January 6th committee because I know it to be theater, and I know I can't afford to grind my teeth as much as I surely would if I...
Okay, all politics is theater, Brett. All politics is theater. That's what politics is, you idiot.
I was tuning in.
Mm-hmm.
But what little I have seen and gleaned does suggest that what's going on here is an obsessive focus on the excesses of one side and a studied disinterest, what Eric calls anti-interest, in the political violence on the other side. And
that's not true at all. The biggest news network, which is Fox News, obsessively talks about leftist violence and about the burning down cities and blah. I mean, like, come on, man. That's fucking ridiculous. But again, it's if you can even make a comparison between January 6th and protests. Any other protests, even the ones that turn into, like, hardcore fucking riots. And you can't compare the two. You can't compare them because they're not the fucking same.
The problem is you can't understand what January 6th was until you realize that it was basically part of a tit-for-tat exchange that stretches back, a couple of years, as I said before.
Again, if we're talking about political protests, these have been going on for decades and decades and decades and decades. And then also centuries, sort of. But, like, as far as, like, protests as a constant fucking thing, in the Pacific Northwest, we've been having protests for decades. Decades! That's just how it is. And protest is American. It's patriotic to protest. It is. It's exercising the rights that we are gifted by our fucking government, by our country, that we have had people fucking fight and die for. Like, these are our rights. Protest is one of the most important things that you can fucking do. How can you even, with what minimal brain cells that you still possess, Brett, how can you actually try and compare these two? There's a really big one. There's a lot of differences, but here's one that right away tosses out why it's different and why you can't compare it. None of those protests, you had the fucking current president of the United States telling them to do it. That's a bit of a difference, don't you think? Maybe something worth pointing out.
So,
before anyone gets their panties in a wad here, you are not justifying anything. You are explaining that this does not exist in a vacuum.
No, of course he's not. He's not excusing anything. He's making a stupid fucking argument, Heather. An insanely stupid fucking argument so that he can basically defend and placate the fucking right wing and cast shit, like throw shade and cover in shit the left, because that's who canceled you, apparently. You're real fucking canceled here.
And that we, as a country, seem to be explicitly avoiding discussion of some types of political violence. I'm not.
We are not. We talk about it all the fucking time. It just isn't happening as often right now. It just isn't. So it's not that big of a fucking conversation. Also, none of those challenged our literal fucking democracy. So it's a pretty historic event, and that's why we're talking about it, okay?
Not others.
Right, but really what I'm saying is that the crime is the committee that is inherently only interested in one kind of political violence.
No, they're interested in one event because it's named literally after the event. They're investigating that event, you absolute mental fucking midget.
The extent that these people want to pretend to be serious patriots investigating a threat to the country.
You said you haven't even watched it, that you're not keeping up with it. How do you even know? You're just like, no, it's just bad. It's just bad. And da, 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 da.
Threat to the country is the process that generates this kind of reaction, right? It's not one side's version of it and the other side's version of it is just fine. That's bullshit, right?
Yep.
So I would.
It's not about sides. It's about what fucking happened. But you haven't even watched it, so you don't know what they're saying. So maybe before you actually talk about something, you should, I don't know what you're fucking talking about. Kind of like when you talk about vaccines or ivermectin, you know? Like, can you just utilize anything that would be reasonable and that people could, like, respect you for, you know? Instead of just being a fucking political puppet.
I would invite everyone to read the article, which we will link in the description, and to just see all of the cases that Jeremy Lee Quinn puts forward and understand this committee as it's basically treason by omission, right?
It's treason by omission. Treason. The January 6th committee is committing treason by omission because they are not investigating something that doesn't have anything to do with why the committee exists. Holy shit, are you a fucking moron?
By highlighting one side's excesses, exaggerating them where possible, and ignoring the excesses of the other side, which are every bit as egregious, it is creating a picture about who is a threat to the country, when in fact the lopsidedness, the double standard is the threat, right? Understanding that we have come to a place where
it's been pretty clear that right now one of the biggest dangers to the country is domestic terrorism. And, like, sure, if there was a lot more, like, leftist domestic terrorists, I would also dislike them just as much as I like any domestic terrorist. Sure. Absolutely. But again, this is all coming down to basically you want a committee formed for one reason to do other things because of politics and because you're a whiny little baby and you look like a badger.
Lost the ability to understand each other. We see the other side as a threat to the country, and we see there being no excess in the challenge to that kind of threat, blah, 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 blah. It's nonsense as long as it's one-sided.
Leftist violence is absolutely studied by groups, by the government. It is watched by fucking law enforcement. Oh yeah, they watch. They're keeping an eye on it. But that's like what their job is. That's not what the January 6th committee's job is.
So, okay, the reason I have come back here is that increasingly all of the issues that we discuss are about double standards and the way they are being
fake double standards so you can cry and whine and pee your pants.
Weaponized, right? Now, Alexandros Marinos has begun to follow this thread quite deliberately. I think it's incredibly important.
Ugh. Okay, well, hey guys, I'm now reminded why I don't watch Bret Weinstein videos. Because I find more intelligent and coherent arguments from, like, Peppa Pig videos, okay? Jesus fucking Christ. The smell of their smug-ass fucking farts must choke anything resembling an intelligence out of that fucking room. Fuck both of them. So obnoxious. Jesus.